they would, if for themselves, they could say that. So I'll start with our director, IBS Kolkata, Dr. Ajay Pathak. Dr. Ajay Pathak is an IIT, is a pass out from IIT. He's done his PhD from there. He was there in the corporate world for over 25 years. He's been with us over 19 years now. So he's like our mentor. He guides us in what we do, and he's one of the best people that I know who can speak about these kind of topics. So we are very thankful that Dr. Pathak is here with us. So thank you, sir. We also have the director IBS Bangalore with us. He's Dr. Mulidhara. He is a pass out from IIM Bangalore. He's a mechanical engineer. He has vast experience in the corporate world. After being in the corporate world for over decades, then he came into academics. He used to head our case research center. And if all of you have heard of ICFI, then you have obviously would have heard of our case studies. And Mulidhara sir we used to head our case research center. And under his guidance, that center has reached international acclaim. I mean, IBS is the third largest contributor of cases worldwide. He himself has authored over 150 cases. So we are lucky that he is here with us today. Thank you, sir. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
We also have with us Dr. D.N. Mishra, Dwarikanath Mishra. Dr. Mishra, he is from DSB. He's the head of DSBM Bhubaneswar. He has been an academician for, I mean, I have grown up seeing him as an academician, as a teacher, and he's been one of the best people that I know for any topic that you can speak of. He's been heading a lot of organizations in Odisha across India. A lot of people look to him for guidance, and he provides them selflessly. He's really a renowned academician, a really great leader, and his views and his thoughts on this policy would, I'm sure, enrich us all. So thank you, sir. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
We also have with us a dean of Bhawanipur College at Kolkata. He's not joined us yet. I don't, has he joined us yet, Tathagat?
Yes, he's there. He's there. I can see him.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
We have Professor Dilip Shah here. Professor Shah, whenever we talk of Kolkata and somebody knowledgeable and some motivational speaker, a person who's very knowledgeable, is obviously always Shah sir. Yeah, he's looked at as being a consultant in major organizations. A lot of people come to him for advice, for guidance, and he helps us all. Once, if you go to his office any day, you will see it filled with students. He is one of the best, greatest motivators that I have seen and I have known. He's also very, very well spoken and very well knowledgeable about uh, be it national education policy, be it any matter. He is an expert in law, in commerce. He teaches a lot of these subjects, and he also imparts his knowledge across. Again, a request to all the speakers: if I'm keeping these profiles as brief as possible. If I've missed something, I would request you can, when you speak, you can come in and say your bit. So that's my introduction. We'll keep it short. Now I will pass on the mic to Dr. Pathak. He will be guiding the discussion, and he will then ask our first speaker to speak, and then he'll moderate it. Sir, please.
Thank you, Abhishek. A very good morning to everybody, the panelists out here, Professor Mulidhara, Dr. D.N. Mishra, and my dear friend, Professor Dilip Shah. It's a great honor to be here to address the principals out here. Principals are the academic leaders of the colleges, the universities. You are all doing an excellent job. And we as academic leaders have got a very important, very important learning from this national education policy. And we have to see to it that this national education policy is implemented. Now, before I hand over the mantle to the other panelists, I would just put few points which for discussion. which can be helpful. I'll just put the context. Now, if you see the National Education Policy 2020, you will find out that it's a 66-page document. 33 pages relate to the school education and 33 pages relate to the higher education. Our focus will be mainly on the higher education because we are all academic leaders in colleges, in institutions. So our focus will be mainly towards that. But what we have to consider is what is the malaise which is there in our education in general. If you see our school education, just a few points about the school education, we all know it has been struggling. If you see the gross enrollment ratios in the schools are going down, the data suggests that 90% of the students are there up to class 5, and then slowly it goes down to 76%, 53%. So schools are leaving the kids are leaving the school, and as per the stats, 3.2 crores kids leave the school at class 5, which is something really very, something very disheartening. Why the kids leave the school so early? So what are the problems? They're very simple. We know it very well. Lack of teachers, lack of infrastructure, lack of learning, lack of quality. One teacher. There are several one teacher schools. Okay, so this national education policy is basically trying to look into the problems at the school education. It is something really very visionary. It's talk about the vision in 2040. It's a long-term policy. What it's trying to indicate is that what must be done to enable that the school education comes up to the level, because lesser students coming out of the school education, we get lesser students at the college level. So the basic problem is in the primary education. So what all can be done? So this national education policy talks about introduction of vocational skills at class 5, at class 8, and is telling that you must have some vocational skills at this stage. Why it is telling that? Because kids at the age of, up to the age of 5, they learn very quickly. So they're talking about coding language up to, even starting at class 1, class 2 level. Any kid can do it. If you see the net, you will find out kids are enrolling for this coding language, which is really very important. And the kids pick up things very, very fast. So what should be done? So here the policy is indicating further that this vocational skills should be introduced. There should be right to education. Right to education was introduced in 2009. And it said that right to education should be there from 6 to 14 years. Now it is saying it should be there from 3 to 18 years. 15 years, that means it is recognizing preschool. Preschool is up to 3 years, and it is saying that in this preschool, the students should be able to just go to school, kids should go to school and play there, because that will enable them to, think better. And that's what it is indicating. It's commendable that the policy is saying that the right to education 2009 will be modified to the extent of from 3 to 18. Now, it is also saying that the study would be not so much intensive. They're trying to reduce the course content because they carry a lot of bags, and there should be a bagless school. That's what they're talking about. In school education, is also talking about community learning. That means the school should be merged because there are only one teacher school. So you should have these schools should be merged together, so that ultimately you have teachers which are handling number of students, kids there. Now, further it is saying that class 9, class 10, class 11, class 12 will not be all that intensive. It should be semester-based education. So these are some of the thought process which came to my mind. I am sharing with you. These and a lot of other points I talked about. I cannot cover everything. I will just also mention a few things about the higher education. Higher education is talking about basic education. That means it is talking about something which is related to one concept, that is you can leave a college at the end of first year with a certificate. You can leave a college at the end of 2 years with a diploma. You can leave a college with a degree, after 3 years, and then there will be a 4-year, degree with research. It has removed MPhil courses. So these are some of the thought process which came to my mind. I wanted to share with you. I would leave it further because there are so many things to discuss. I would now request Professor Muralidhara to speak, on particularly contents relating to higher education in the national education policy.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Phatak, and good morning to all the principals who have come to attend this interaction. And I'm sure we are all going to have a very good interaction, and we will be able to share the ideas from all of us. And I'll just, before I go into the higher education, specific points related to higher education, I'll spend 1 or 2 minutes in terms of the background of this particular education policy 2020. That there was the previous policies. We had one in 1968. The major emphasis was on compulsory education for children up to the age of 14. That was one of the major things. 1986, it focused on removing disparity between various social groups and achieving uniformity of education across social groups. And but the 1986 did not specifically take into account the globalization aspect, which came into prominence with the 1991 globalization. Now we are in a globalized environment, and there are a lot of developments, and India also went in for a major liberalization in 1991 when it became a part of the global value chains. And we have also gone through a lot of developments after that in terms of various liberalization measures that the government has implemented. And subsequently, we have also had a lot of developments in technology, which has naturally impacted education also. So the current education policy 2020 is basically focusing on balancing local and global human resource needs of the growing Indian economy and post-liberalization. The Indian economy naturally, as all of you know, trying to become one of the big economic powers across the world. And the major emphasis that I see in this policy is to bring in flexibility for students. And another important aspect that the policy is emphasizing is making education multidisciplinary. So apart from whatever Dr. Phatak mentioned about the importance of preschooling and providing them a holistic education in the school, the higher education, it emphasizes on providing students a lot of flexibility in terms of what they choose to learn, and also taking out the silos in terms of a student has to study only science or only arts or only technology, etc., to give them flexibility to choose from different areas, including the arts, languages, the science, engineering. Even if an engineering student is interested in going into some other subject which is of his interest, he should have the flexibility to do it. And it again, the focus on skill-based learning, and the emphasis, the aim of education in the current the policy is basically on creating citizens with knowledge, skills, and individual development, and to achieve full human potential and development of a just and equitable society, and promoting national development. And another important thing that it emphasizes is to cultivate critical thinking, the ability to participate in discussions, and analytical learning. We have been used to students who are used to rote learning, focus on examinations, and then they come out to the college where they are not industry ready, so they have a lot of problems in terms of finding employment. So here a lot of emphasis is being given in terms of continuous evaluation, providing them opportunities where they develop their skills, and specifically critical thinking, discussion, and analytical learning. And it is also, as Dr. Phatak has already mentioned, they have specifically identified various problems that are associated with the current higher education system. But one of the points that many of the people who have been discussing about the higher education policy have been talking about is that most of these have been a result of over centralization and a lot of control. So the current policy is trying to give a lot of autonomy, and it says that it wants to make it light and tight. So light meaning there will not be too many restrictions, though the policy talks of many organizations which are related to regulation, etc. We'll have to see practically how it is implemented. So light means less regulation, tight means those who don't follow the regulations on their own will have heavy penalties. So that is one of the main things that we see. And so there is a lot of autonomy being given to educational institutions, and there is a flexibility in terms of when they can exit. Students can exit from their 4-year under this graduation course, and then the masters has also been divided into 1 and 2 years, and MPhil has been done away with. And also, they have classified institutions, higher education institutions, into three types. One is the universities which will focus on teaching, another which will focus on research and also teaching, but for one which focuses totally on research, another on research and teaching, and the third one are basically the independent and standalone institutions and clusters which will be attached to universities as constituent colleges. And they're trying to do away in the next 15 years the system of affiliated colleges. That is one of the problems that we have. There are hundreds and thousands of institutions which are attached to universities. So how the control happens, so it is a big question mark. So they're trying to do away in the next 15 years all these affiliated college system. That is one of the important things that is being brought in. And independent accreditors with regulatory institutions, that is what is being thought of. And autonomy for teachers, a lot of flexibility in terms of how you want to frame your curriculum. But the main thing is that, as I said earlier, there has been a lot of centralization and control, and experts are talking that the culture of mistrust and control which has been there, unless we do away with that, and there is trust and a lot of autonomy given to institutions to progress, it will not be possible to bring in a radical change from whatever we have been doing. So basically, I think it is a matter of culture. As a culture, we have a certain given, and we are trying to do something from whatever is already existing. So how far we'll be able to come out of this and then come out with a totally new landscape, that is to be seen. And one issue that we see is that there are so many agencies that we are talking, and some of them are going to be reincarnations or combinations of the existing agencies. Whether it will bring in restrictions and bureaucracies in a new avatar, that is something which we will have to guard against. And another important thing that we need to see is that the policy, though it says a lot about what is a vision and what we want to achieve, there is no clear roadmap in terms of, though they have given certain targets, a very clearly roadmap in terms of how we want to achieve in steps. Otherwise, like the previous policies, many of that would be on the paper, and it may be difficult to actually implement things on the ground. Okay, now I pass it on to the other panelists.
Yes, may I request Professor Dilip Shah to give his views? Thank you, Professor Mulidhara. You nicely, mentioned whatever points we were supposed to mention. Good, good. Thank you. Yes, Professor Dilip Shah.
Dr. Mishra.
Dr. Dilip Shah.
Dilip Shah, is it? Okay.
Yeah, you're on the mute. There is some audio issue. We are not able to hear you.
We are not able to see him also.
No, Dilip Shah is there. He's there.
But we are not able to see him on the screen.
So I think you just need to click on the mic there on the screen and dial in.
Hello.
Yes, yes.
It is audible.
Can you see me and hear me?
Yeah, both.
Yeah, I think video and audio both are working, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Hello. All right, friends. I think that Dr. Pathak started off very well with giving an overview, and then of course Mr. Muralidharan. I have heard Mr. Muralidharan earlier, both of them, in fact. So, good morning to everybody. Now, I'll share some thoughts. Already, a lot of things have been said, and we can deep dive into it later. Uh, I have been fortunate in the sense that I could meet Dr. Kasturi Rangan during the time when this framework was going on. This work was because Subramaniam ji had started it during Irani's time, Smriti Irani's time, and then later on, I think Kasturi Rangan took over. The whole idea was, as the previous speaker said it very rightly, to balance between local and global, and that is how basically the policy tries to do. And before anything, I think we must remember although there's a lot of hue and cry that we hear about one aspect about that mother tongue and regional language and things like that. I think that all of us can kind of look at it this way, that it's basically a policy. It's just a niti. It's not something that has happened. It is just the direction or the desire that the government has put in place. It can be in the draws for maybe 10 years. Nothing may happen. As long as things actually start moving by way of notification and things like that, I don't think that we need to take it all that very seriously. But yes, at the same time, the direction is something that we can definitely take a look at. For example, they are talking right to education. Now, right to education, as rightly said, used to be from 6 to 14. Now it will be from 3 to 18. And why 3 to 18? Because we are now talking about nursery, and then we are talking about lower KG, and then we are talking about upper KG and class 1, 2, and things like that. So you have 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4, as all of you all probably are aware. This is basically the structure. So now it has to be 3 to 18. So that's how the whole thing fits. So from 3 to 18, we have right to education. And here, now the big question is that likely to happen, or is it just something that is a policy document? Well, the government looks interested in doing it, but at the same time, if you see, compare it with the right to education in 2009, what the RTE was, then the way it is spelled out, there is to a certain extent dilution. It's not, although the span has gone up, dilution in the sense, I mean, I'll not go into it, but it is not as many things as were expected out of it. It is to a certain extent more broad based, but the dilution part is there. The policy seems to be mute. It's not commenting anything as so far as reservations are concerned. So that is one more matter that we may I'm just making an observation. At the same time, hello.
Audio बोलिଥିଲା
No, no. Audio join.
Yes,
Hello.
yes, go ahead now.
Yeah, we also see that the doors have been opened to foreign universities, and therefore, obviously, there will be a lot of universities who will gradually be coming in. There is nothing to my mind which talks about controlling or marginalizing or streamlining commercialization. Private players will have, as the previous speaker said, autonomy, yes, but at the same time, commercialization and things like that may become a matter of concern, because the policy document is silent on that. I also was able to go through the Yashpal Singh report when he is starting. He's talking about UGC and the powers of UGC. As the policy talks about it, that the powers of the UGC are both regulatory and funding. Everything is with the UGC. The policy might want to separate the two. So these sort of changes, they're talking also about National Education Commission, in which the education minister, earlier it was proposed that the finance minister, prime minister would be heading it, but then later it is proposed that no, the education minister should head it, and there will be representation of the state and things like that. So there is an element of democratization. At the same time, there is an element of centralizing things. Those kind of things are there. The budgetary allocation definitely seems to be going up. the intention is that it may go up to maybe 6%. Presently, it is about 4.5%. In fact, they are talking about 20% of the government spending should be on education. So a lot of good things and a lot of things that we might be concerned about, but at the same time, so far as English medium education is concerned, see, the policy doesn't talk about doing away with it. It's just saying that to promote regional language, mother language, etc., up to a certain stage. But I don't practically think that anybody is going to do anything against English language as such. It's just a matter of policy. I don't think that we need to be taking it that very, in that manner. So I think altogether it's quite a balanced, quite good. The policy is good. We are at least clear that this is the direction on which the government is thinking. To what extent it is going to get implemented soon, I don't know. But piecemeal things might happen. But yes, the direction is that multidisciplinary, the previous speaker spoke about. I think it is absolutely fine. I mean, we have engineers who study only engineering. That is not the way things around the world is. Everywhere the engineers also know a little about the social sciences and things like that. I think that is a welcome change. So good and bad, everything together. I think it's a direction that the policy gives us. And more than anything else, I feel quite positive about it. And one thing is for sure that they are going to try and make a very good effort, because they are talking about dropouts very seriously. They are talking about vocational training seriously. And in fact, the government is thinking that maybe we'll curtail it to 90% or something like that. So many of them would probably finish class 12, class 11. So that is 5 plus 3 plus 3 at least. And then that is basically the entire outlook. So on the higher education, the flow of the students in general is going to become more and more. And so that is basically the outlook that I can see. Altogether, I think that there is no need that we should be aping the West. I mean, we must always remember one thing, that India was a place where education was there even 1000 or 1500 or 2000 years ago. It's only in the last 600-700 years that things have changed. In fact, women used to be 90%, 80% of the women used to be literate once upon a time. It's just that in between things went a little here and there. But I think we are back to normal. It cannot be like this. I mean, if you look at the structure of education that we've been having in schools in particular, then in that case, you have a class of history, and then bang, there is a bell that rings, and after that, there's a class of mathematics, and then the bell rings, and suddenly you have to start learning literature. You can't have children learning like that. That could be, you see, generally the way in which education is happening right now, it's more compliance oriented. It is more, I would say it is more obedience that we are trying to promote and less of intelligence. The direction of the policy is to promote uh, ingenuity, it is to promote research, it is to promote learning, and not learning things by heart, not rote method, because in any case, a lot of information is available very freely. Nowadays, we are living in a stage of information deluge. Are we in a position where decisions can be taken, where imagination has its say, where research has its way? This is basically the direction that the policy is trying to chalk out. And from that standpoint, I think we are doing a pretty good job, because the times have changed. A lot of things have got disrupted, and the policy seems to at least have a mindset to set those things in place. So I think all of us can look at it from that standpoint. And I have also talked about a few concerns which I have. That is it from my side. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I am more than happy to be talking to an August gathering of principals from far and wide. I can see people from Orissa and Assam and all the other places. So thank you very much for this opportunity. And with that, I rest my speech here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Dilip Shah. Well said. It's a directional policy. It is just telling us how to proceed. And a lot of content is, if you read the policy, they're very progressive in nature, and they are trying to indicate that yes, you must try to inculcate these things, understand the problems, and we as academic leaders will have to take this role and see to it. Whatever they are trying to say, let us see how it can be implemented, because implementation can be a big issue. Okay,
Absolutely.
thank you
Thank
so much,
you so much.
Professor Dilip Shah. May I request Dr. D.N. Mishra to, speak a few words on this national education policy. I know you are a lovely person, and I know you personally also in our earlier principals meet. Yes, Dr. D.N. Mishra, I'd like to hear your thoughts, please.
Thank you, Dr. Pathak. I'll be requesting to give the permission of sharing the screen. If you have done, fine, simultaneously. Let me convey regards to Professor Muralidhar, Professor Dilip Shah, and all eminent principal of all degree colleges, because they are the team leader, they are driving the institution, including us. So I convey thanks to all of them to be part of this wonderful panel discussion. Okay, so in fact,
Yes, Dr. Mishra, you have got a screen to share?
yes, sir, yes, sir.
Yeah, Abhishek is doing it. Who is doing that? Abhishek, you are there?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm getting it done, sir. Just give me 1 minute.
Yeah, sure.
Fine, by the time the screen sharing will be done, but I want to take you in different perspectives. I can say Dr. Pathak and Abhishek, they have decided the topic in very good manner. I mean, the paradigm shift of NEP, the National Education Policy. They have touched the crux of that points, particularly over these cases. So I have identified, Abhishek, you are able to share the screen?
Abhishek, you are required to be a host, otherwise you cannot share it. Are you the host, co-host, or?
Anyone can share if you allowed the participants to share.
Yeah, that is there, but I think Dr. Mishra is not the co-host. Yeah, I don't think he can share it.
No, you don't need to be a co-host. Any participant can share if you have given that option.
Yeah, that option you have to look into it. No? So I think, yes.
Go to share screen, then go to advanced options.
Yeah.
And allow participants to share.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Actually, yes, sir. Now he is the co-host, so he can now share.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm just sharing that now.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We have got it, sir.
Yes, fine. So let me welcome again to all of you, particularly all dignified principals over this next particular session. Next. So I'm just coming to the most important aspects, particularly the topic decided, paradigm shift of NEP. Let me just revisit the NEP of 1986 and 2020. In the span of 34 years, you can see the shifting, that is from access and equity to quality education and holistic approach. The orientation is different. Particularly 2020, they are going to shift from access and equity to quality education and holistic approach. The another thing you can see, the paradigm shift, what we are talking about, traditional campus culture, as mentioned by Professor Shah, and we are moving towards the future ready campus culture. Like basically, you can see in IVS always the more corporate people is there, and we have wonderful panelists. Professor Muralidhar used to be teaching about the case study approach of learning. So that is our orientation is going to be happen in the NEP 2020 itself. The third one, the paradigm shift, the platform of academic transactions. So basically, as far as my understanding of visiting many undergraduate colleges, so there is a no good platform for research and innovation. We are only supposed to be lecturing the academic transactions. We are giving priority of completion of the course curriculum as prescribed by the universities. But now we are moving towards not only from the platform of academic transactions, we are moving towards a wonderful platforms, academics, research and innovation. I think this might be a very good kickstart for academic research and innovation in process of time, but it is not, I'm not suggesting that it can be done overnight, but it can be a good start to lead global knowledge superpower for India. There is a possibility over that. The next, the paradigm shift is that, as mentioned by some of eminent panelists regarding that after 15 years, we'll go for the autonomous structures. So at present, particularly those are autonomous institutions, they have a lot of freedom for deciding curriculum, examination, everything. But particularly the affiliated colleges, they are within the rigid and restricted structure. In fact, the orientation of NEP 2020, they are moving towards the autonomy and flexible structures. So these are basically 4 points I have identified the paradigm shift of NEP. But esteemed principals, I'm not going to repeat the points which is already discussed by very eminent panelists. I'm suggesting that let the sessions should be two-way traffic, have good interactive sessions. In fact, I have identified 4 issues for critical analysis. 4 issues for the critical analysis. I'm just suggesting the point, what is the next critical analysis? I'll take 2 points only, not 4 points, because the time limit is given 10 minutes. I'll try to take 2 points. After that, it is better for the forum to discuss. But I'm talking to the realities, the aspects over. So I have identified, which everybody also mentioned, the multidisciplinary institutions. Multidisciplinary institution, repeatedly the orientation has given to multidisciplinary institution. So what exactly the issue is? The issue is the transition from standalone institution to multidisciplinary institution. It is very good sounding. Instead of 1 or 2 or 3, 4 courses, you will have multidisciplinary institutions will be there in the process of time. Fine, very good. But you can see what is the opportunities of these issues. Yes, the student will have an ample opportunity to choose the basket, choose the subject from wide range of discipline. Like abroad countries, students are reading physics and accounting. So there will be a big basket. The students can choose as per their choice, fine, as per their interest. This is the good opportunities. But we have to analyze the challenges, because we principal, we the team leaders, we are going to implement that in our institutions. That is, so we have to visualize what are the challenges we might facing for that over these issues. If we are going for the multidisciplinary institutions, then certainly we have to create progressive physical infrastructure. I hope all esteemed principal colleagues will agree with me that we have to think about progressive or matching lecture hall, laboratories, and all necessary infrastructures. So we have to think for that. And simultaneously, as mentioned in the introductory thought by Dr. Pathak, that gross enrollment ratio is going to be double almost by 2035. Excellent. It is a very good sign. But for that, we have to go for the recruitment of more number of the faculties, and simultaneously, I think the provision of the training program to bring in the holistic approach among the higher education institutions. I have visited many educational institutions in different occasions. So there is no such good platform for the training provisions. Like in case of school education, they have NCERT, many institutions are providing training. So those are autonomous institutions, fine. But I'm talking about affiliated colleges. There should be a good training program to. We are now restricted of delivering the classes only. But here the approach is completely different. We are not going to confine ourselves within lectures. We have to think about the field work. We have to think about the project work. We have to give a good ecosystem of innovation and creativity, all these things. So for that, all the teachers community need to have been oriented for this holistic approach. So these are the important challenges are there if we are moving from standalone institution to multidisciplinary institutions. So I'm not telling only the problems or challenges. What can be the mitigation strategy for us with the esteemed principles? What should be the possible mitigation strategy so that we can address that very nicely? The higher education institution should prepare the roadmap for developing the physical as well as intellectual infrastructure facilities. Both physical infrastructures, intellectual infrastructures also to be developed for effective implementation of National Education Policy 2020 has to be announced. Even if the SOP is not announced by the government, how it is to be operational, but we have to also make prior planning for that to prepare a roadmap. At least we can draw the attention of the management that these are the possible mitigation strategy so that there will be no problem by the time it will be implemented. Rather, we will be more confident to implement that provided we have taken good step in advance. Then in addition to that, which may be unique, the dedicated training centers should be established at the state level for faculty development program to meet the objective of NEP. Maybe the collaboration, like the IBS always have the passion of conducting many knowledge sharing sessions. So like that, some institutions come forward for the training program. Despite of that, as we are moving from complete only instead of academic transactions, we are moving towards academics, research and creativity. So this is why a lot of training orientation program is required to be done. So my all esteemed principal, I will take one more point instead of all 4 points of critical analysis. The second one, which is completely mentioned many times in the NEP 2020, that multiple exit option in UG course. After 1 year, after diploma students can exit. After 2 years advanced diploma, they can exit. After 3 years degree, they can also exit. After 4 years with research, they can also exit. Fine, it is good. But we have to think about what is the impact will be their institutions. Because when we are going to make a critical analysis, we have to think about what the impact to the students community, what is the impact to the teachers community, they are the centric of the institutions, and what is going to impact in the knowledge-based society. That we have to visualize. It is very easy. It is very good sounding, multiple exit option and entry as per the choice. But we have to see what impact is going to have in the undergraduate colleges for that. That we have to visualize. So being the principal, being the team leader, it is our job to visualize and to have that sustainable strategy. What are the opportunities for this multiple exit point option? Yes, the students can have work experience in between the exit point without losing any academic credit. The way when we are going to the bank for loan, they used to assess our position as per the CIBIL score. Like that also, the students will have the academic credit. Fine. So they will have job experience in between. they can have 1 year job, again they can come back, it is good. This is one good opportunities of the multiple exit option. And another opportunity is that this option will lead to in gross enrollment ratio, which Dr. Pathak is more concerned, Professor Muralidhar also are more concerned. Yes, that is one opportunities of increase to gross enrollment ratio and reduction in the dropout rate. That will be a good aspects, particularly multiple exit option in the UG courses. When there is opportunities, there will be challenges. We have to face the challenges. We, the principal, we have to face that challenges. It will have certainly, being administrators, being the principal is the job is to take the academics and also to take the administration into account. It will have an adverse financial implication on the self-financing institution. As I mentioned, we have to think about progressive physical infrastructures, progressive intellectual infrastructures. We have to see whether, I'm talking about in fact the self-financing institutions, whether we are able to generate that amount of fund to give the service to each and every students. That should be taken care. So even if they have increased, multifold increase of budgetary support, but we have to think about how the self-financing institutions, because if you analyze the colleges, there is a different category of the colleges. Autonomous colleges are there, grantee colleges, grantee-aided colleges are there, block-aided colleges there, so many colleges. Because we are not talking about the micro individual institutions, we are talking about the macro level. So we have to think about what financial implication will be there. So we should not wait for 2-3 years. We have to think now. We have to exercise our mind how we are able to raise more amount of the fund. What are the subjects to be taken care so that the institution will be feasible and we are able to sustain. That is important challenge to be taken care. We are ready to offer more basket, but simultaneously we have to see the cost benefit approach of that. There is also another question regarding the acceptance among the students community. Yes, we have given the option 1 year exit, 2 year exit, but we have to see, the time will say how far it is accepted by the students, and particularly those are the administrator, those are the principal, for them it is not easy job to maintain the administration for that, having the database, because multiple exit and multiple entry. So financial aspects will be also affected. So that should be taken care for these challenges. Again, the last aspects, yes, what is the possible mitigation strategy? Yes, every change we have to accept. Change the only constant thing in this world. We have to go for that, but we have to go with possible mitigation strategy for this particular challenges. The higher education institution should explore the feasibility of raising funds for sustainability, whether from getting the grant from the government or industry, or you have to make your efforts to raise that funds. So we have to think about that to have this multiple exit option. And the most important thing, which I feel, sometimes I take some motivation classes of some of the students in different places. Basically, I used to take effective leadership for winning situation. Actually, there is a lack of counseling among the young students. Students are good, but the thing is that we have to drive them in a particular way. So for that, we principal, we the educationists, particularly the IBS should take leading role over this, as they're always organizing many knowledge sharing program. So they should come forward of creating awareness and counseling to the students regarding these multiple exit points. And so that should be taken into account. So in fact, I have 2 more points, but I'll not discuss now. If there is a time, we can go for 2 more points. I'm just mentioning that. I'll not go in detail. The next point, as mentioned one of my panelists, the research orientation in higher education institution. That I'm not going to debate. That is open discussions. And the last critical analysis, what I thought for this, internationalization of higher education. We have to also analyze if this particular issue, what will the opportunities for us, for India, for students community, for the teachers community, for the knowledge-based society, and what the challenges will come over this. Then we the teachers, what possible mitigation strategy we have to formulate so that we are able to lead to win-win situation. So that particular 2 points, that internationalization of higher educations and the ecosystem of the research environment, that is open for discussion with many good eminent principals are there. So we can have a very good discussion on that. So these are my perspectives to draw the attention of in this digital platform. I'll be happy to have debate over these 2 points. This is my perspective. I'm sure many principals can give their own perspective so that we can have a very open discussion so that each principal can enjoy over this. So over to Dr. Pathak.
Thank you, Dr. Mishra. It was really an excellent presentation. Specific critical points you had covered, particularly regarding the exit options. There are a lot of issues there. And also, talked about, what will be the infrastructure and all that. But one thing I'd like to mention, there's a content in the National Education Policy that, the private universities, there should be a collaboration between private and public also, so that, they get the excellence of the private universities, private colleges, and ultimately both of them work together. That's one important point which is mentioned in the policy, and the policy is very progressive in nature. The point which you raised about foreign universities, yes, there is a content in the higher education policy that 100 top foreign universities were allowed to come to India and set up the campus. Then there will be, a lot of issues regarding what will happen to the existing, will they take it over, what will be the cost structure and all that. There are a lot of issues to be discussed. And, I would now like to open the discussion to the forum, the principals to, give their thoughts on the points raised. Whatever they want to discuss, they can unmute themselves and, discuss. It is open to the forum now to discuss. Dear principals, you can put your points now, whatever thoughts have been expressed out here. You can restrict yourself, talk to the higher education, particularly from the college education side. Yes, Dr. Siddharth, you would like to mention something?
Yes, I am from Christ College, Cuttack. I welcome all the panelists, particularly Dr. Ajay Ketan Naik of SPY Business Schools, Dr. Ajay Pathak, IBS Kolkata, Professor Dilip Saha, Bhavanipur Education Society, Dr. D.N. Mishra, Principal DAV Business School, Bhubaneswar, and Professor Muralidharan for their very, very useful data regarding NEP. In fact, from 1968 to 1986, and from 1986, 2 phases of this education policy has given very good content, and in 2020 to 2040, we are going to be another radical change in the education policy, and various features are there which the panelists will discuss today. But 1 or 2 points I would suggest my opinion, that regarding the MPhil that has been discontinued, but MPhil actually could be there as a beginning of the PhD program, but it should be in the same line as that of PhD. If the MPhil is there, that should be there, and it will be preliminary to the PhD, and it should be of same line of research. Then that is good, because earlier it was that you do MPhil in some other subject and get a degree, and do PhD in other subjects, get the degree. that has no relationship. So if the MPhil is there, there should be in a continuation to the PhD. That is one of the point of my observation. And regarding the multiple exit, as Dr. Mishra has pointed out, it's a very good thing that within the 4-year graduation, one can drop at any stage, and that will continue later on. It is flexibility is a very good thing. And other thing is that there should be best practices among the students, to involve best practices among the students. Just like nowadays students are becoming very uninterested for the games and sports, and also they're becoming more prone towards the mobile and computer. So by virtue of which they are losing all physical exercises. So out of the best practices, we can include some, like if they can come to the school with bicycle, like in all other foreign universities, they promote more to the bicycle than automobiles. That would be a very good venture for towards environment friendly approach. And of course, there are the physical education, yoga and games that should be promoted with the aptitude of the students, those who are actually interested for the games. From the beginning, from the childhood stage, they should be taken out, and accordingly they should be brought up with their own interest of games and sports. And regarding research orientation of higher education institutions, actually research is very much limited with the universities at present, and there is no promotion of research in the college level, and that should be promotion to the college level for research and orientation programs. And the other thing I would say that for the benefit of teachers, actually UGC and HRD in the higher level, they presume that all the teachers they must be getting UGC scale or something better paid. But in the ground reality, it is not that. There are several kinds of teachers are there. Some are management, some are block grant, some are like state scale, and very few are of UGC scale. So that UGC and HRD have framed for a lucrative scale, so that all good scholars, they will come in the teaching line and impart better teaching to the students, and develop better citizens of the country. Actually, that principle is not reality, as because this parity of the scale is there among the teachers of various category, as a result of which better teachers are not coming to the teaching line. So that part should be taken care with the state government, because state government they are giving like their own features of policy, because the education is a concurrent list, and center is doing something, states are doing their own way. So once the regulatory authorities are there, like UGC and HRD, they must see that this should be implemented. Like for example, UGC is giving that that is age for superannuation, it is 65 years for the teachers, but some state they are having 58 years, some are having 60 years, some 62 years. That should not be there.
Okay.
Of course, there should be no, like
Okay.
as per the
Yes, Dr. Siddhartha, I think you have made your point. Just
Yeah.
regarding MPhil, I would like to just add that MPhil, see what they have done in this policy is that you do your 4-year program. That means you have done your graduation. Then 1 year you have to do research. And then you do 1 year of post-graduation and then go over to PhD. That's the flow chart. That's what this education policy. And that is why they have discontinued MPhil. I was going through the documents which are attached to those 66 page. It is mentioned why they have discontinued the MPhil. MPhil, you are correct very much that stating that, because the research is already at a discount. If I give you certain figures about research, we are at 0.69% of GDP in our country, the research which is happening. And in other countries, in US, if you see, it's 4.4%. Another point which you well made was regarding the salary. Salary, if you see in US, the salary is around $40,000 to $45,000 per annum, and here it is $1,700. There's a huge gap. When you are thinking of quality education, we'll have to compensate our faculty significantly so that they deliver quality education. So good people, people from corporate, they would not like to join, an institution because they have to sacrifice huge amount of salary. So if these corporate people come to academics, I think the situation will change, and this is definitely what is required. It's only, I think corporate people should be able to join an academic institution provided they are compensated. These are some of the points I wanted to add. Yes, anybody else who would like to?
yes, if we can suggest this point,
yes,
that regarding parity and for
Yes,
better payment of the teachers, we
Yes.
can suggest so that the HRD and UGC, they will take care of these things seriously.
Yes,
That
it
is
is
my-
there. It is there in the policy. They're talking about quality education. They're telling that.
No, policy it is there, but ground
Yes.
reality and it's not
Yes.
implemented.
Yes,
That is
correct.
the
I
thing.
agree with you. Implementation is always an issue.
So
It
that
is-
we will suggest.
Yeah, definitely. Yes.
See, when you talked about investment in research and development, the research and development investment actually is done by the corporates. And Indian corporates, to a large extent, they have not been focusing on innovation and research and development and coming out with new technologies, products, etc. And we have been trying to copy a lot of what Western countries have done. Very few companies, actually now a few companies have come into basic research and applied research. And I think one area where research in universities can improve and become prominent is, as you said, a collaboration with industries and countries like US. If you see, corporates fund a lot of research activities. I think how much government can contribute, they give a lot of research projects, and the defense also gives a lot of projects to the universities. So that is an area where corporates can give. Nowadays, some projects are being given to IITs and all. But other universities also, if corporates can give projects, fund them, then it can give a fillip to research in universities. Not just publishing papers, but coming out with new innovations from these universities.
Yes, good. Thank you, Professor Mulidhara. Yes, any other principal would like to put certain questions, or if you want to speak something for about 2 to 3 minutes, you are welcome. Yes, Professor Ranjan Kumar Swain, you would like to say something?
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes,
Sir, in this sir, am I audible?
yes, you are audible.
Good afternoon to all, sir. I have a question here. So particularly in this new education policy, what is there for the short term and intermediate term, by which the policy which is planned to be completely implemented by 2040, or in other sense, if you start from a child from the age of 3, when you're going to 18, then will come to the higher education institutes. So how the higher education institute will cater the things in short term and in intermediate term, by which in a long term we can able to achieve this new education policy. Is there anything in the policy, sir?
Yeah, I see. It is indicating a flow. It is saying that 3 to 18, and they will then go over to the first year of college. Okay, that's what is mentioned, and it is saying that during the school education, basically up to class 12, they will be acquiring some more vocational skills. They're even talking about artificial intelligence. They're talking about machine learning at the school stage itself. So that's what they're indicating, that yes, from there you will go to college, and ultimately in college also there will be something which will help you to add these additional skills required, because ultimately it will help you in placements. That's what it is talking about. It's talking about quality education, talking about lesser load to the faculty members as far as regulation is concerned, because a lot of faculty members do a lot of administrative job also. So there will be less of over regulation. That's what it's saying, because we'll have to go through higher education commission would be there. I think it will be one regulatory authority which will take care of 4 different things relating to funding, relating to standards, relating to accreditation. Okay, so these things would be there, and one particular regulatory authority will take care of that.
Respected Pathak, my question is different. My question is, suppose as a higher education institute, whatever feeder I am getting now, the feeder will take minimum as it is from 13 to 15 years to get the feeders in the new policy. So how we can adjust from tomorrow to support this higher?
Yes, I get your point. What you are trying to indicate basically is that when will it be implemented? That's what your question is?
I think what I have understood from what he is saying, if a child enters the new system at the age of 3, they will come out of that new system at the age of 18. Right now, what is it? The students from the schools are the ones which are being fed to the higher education. So what is being done to give us the students who are equipped to enter the higher education sector the way it is envisaged? That is what I think he is trying to ask.
I mean to say, sir, suppose within a year or 2 years, whomsoever students are coming, how we can take them in the tune of this new education policy? That is the thing.
Okay. So what you are trying to say, when will the shift happen? When will the shift happen? Suppose now and later, what is going to happen? That's what you're saying. What about the existing students?
Now, how gradually we can shift, sir? That is a policy should be there. It should be gradually we will achieve that.
Yes,
transformation from the new.
See, existing system will be allowed to continue up to a particular point. See, implementation is a big issue here. When will it start? What will happen to the existing system? So that gap will always be there. That we have to, because implementation, as I told you, it will take time. Our Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, has said that we will start off from 2022. So now 2 years is still there is a gap. Okay.
See, first is that the main thing, the first point in implementation is that the states have to accept it and implement specific policies coming out in this particular national education policy. So there is a big responsibility for the state first to accept it, then implement in full spirit. I am seeing a lot of action by some state governments. Yesterday I saw in the newspaper, Karnataka government is trying to do a lot of things right, because you have to do a lot of things right at the district levels. Because if you look at not only urban, the rural, the education system and the teachers, training of teachers at the district level, panchayat level, how are you going to change things? That requires a lot of training, etc. And NCERT has been given a lot of responsibility to bring in a lot of curriculum change and creating resources. I think that is something which will start off immediately. And as Dr. Phatak mentioned, implementation is an issue which we have to see how the states are going to respond and how they are going to implement. Telangana government is doing a lot of work. And in fact, there is a parallel seminar going on from 11 o'clock, 10 o'clock, I think. FICCI is organizing how Telangana government is trying to capitalize on this particular policy and then trying to do a lot of things. They are trying to attract a lot of new universities and improve the educational infrastructure. So it depends on how progressive the states are.
Dr. Pathak, permission, I can take a few seconds of addressing the points.
Yes, Dr. Mishra, yes.
Raised by Ranjan Kumar Swai. He raised a very good point. Time that is mismatch. What exactly you want to draw the attention? The mismatch of the school education and connecting to the higher education. What he said is a very relevant point. Actually, as per my understanding of reading the policies and attending as a panelist in many sessions, so there will be a transition period. There will be a transition period of implementing, and simultaneously also, particularly in Odisha also, there is already a task force is already constituted. Some are there in the members. How they can facilitate that new education policy, they are also working also for that. So there will be certainly a transition process of converting to that, and simultaneously for the effective coordination, they have made the task force committee so that they can facilitate the process. And Dr. Siddharth sir also mentioned very good point that particularly the undergraduate colleges, they don't have any ecosystem of research, but that's a foundation should be started. And what he mentioned, I completely agree. In record, you'll find very less number of the faculties are in the UGC fold. All are the lecturers, all are the teachers. So there should be the uniform practices for all teachers of UG colleges. So over to Dr. Pathak.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Dr. Mishra. Any other principal, yes, would like to say something? Dr. Ashok Shaw, you are there. So if you would like to say something about the policy, your questions, your doubts in your mind.
Good afternoon, all respected principals gathered here from all over India. Actually, some points which arose in my mind actually, how to take care the financial impact on self-financial institutions, how it will be taken care, because many exit and lots of these things are there.
Yes, yes. Yes, yes. Dr. Mishra, would like to say something? Yes, you can add. He's asking about finance, how does funding?
Dr. Ashok Saw, this is a point which I have already drawn the attention. Yes,
you pointed out.
This is a really crux of the discussion, particularly for the self-financing institution. We have to think about the financial avenues. Ultimately, you have to run the institution. So in that case, my mitigation strategy, possible mitigation strategy, I can say that in fact there will be multiple exit. Then we should also try to have multiple entry simultaneously, multiple exit, matching multiple entry, that we have to think being the self-financing institutions. Like this outbreak of COVID-19, we have converted the challenges into opportunities, like sitting here and we are able to discuss so many things without taking air cost, anything. We have a nice discussion. So that is point one. We have to think about multiple entry to the system, and simultaneously also we have to think about some different certificate course, because they have given freedom, 15 days course, 30 days course, and starting small consultancy work by the teachers, as Dr. Siddharth said about the ecosystem of research should be in the undergraduate college. I think by that way, and also 15 days or 30 days computer training program, as mentioned, advanced Excel or business analytics, something like that. So there can be a good start of starting the generating more revenue for that. So this is my input to Dr. Saw.
Yeah, actually, that's fine. The points whichever you suggested, that is very impressive, and that can be taken care. But the point is, all institutions are up to that level to catch up from that point, starting point.
Sir,
so
we have
initially,
to think about to start the queue.
Yeah, obviously, but just starting is. Do you think some institutions are there even lots of even general degree colleges are there, where lots just actually we can say in 0.1 or 0.2% faculty members are doing research work there.
Exactly, sir.
So yeah, so actually whatever we are saying, that's fine, but on reality ground, initially are they able to pick up from there, or they need some kind of help, or some kind of just inputs, or collaboration, or some stronger institution, well established institutions nearby in their neighborhood. So is there some kind of relations they can support such kind of institutions, because lots of such kinds of institutions are there, and especially in the rural area especially.
Okay.
One of the things that the policy talks about is providing a body for funding of the research specifically.
Yeah.
I think particularly since you are talking about research, apart from the other funding requirements, the policy talks about a fund for research being available to all institutions which want to take up research projects. I think that is something which will crystallize in the coming years, and maybe funds will be available to institutions which will want to focus on research.
Yeah.
And second thing is, in some of the other countries, a lot of reputed institutions depend a lot on endowments. I think that is something which is not stated anywhere, and that is a major source of funding for many of the higher education institutions, and that is something which Indian institutions can also look for. If they build a good reputation, they can attract a lot of endowments, and also the corporates can also provide endowments, and particularly the CSR funding, they can use it for providing endowments to institutions, setting up chairs, setting up specific programs, those kind of things.
And with due respect, Pathak sir, for education, school level education, one point
Yes,
I have, yeah.
Please.
Just for the school children, just the kind of infrastructure, many of respected panelists have already touched that point, but on reality ground, lots of schools are there from where actually students itself, the teachers, just with due respect, I'm telling you, just with due respect to all teachers and everybody, but we will have to accept the reality ground also. So see how the teachers will understand these systems. Just choice-based educations. Now students will have the freedom in which direction they want to go. So these things must be clear to grassroots school, just primary level school teachers also. So how to guide the students and the kind of infrastructure they should have in rural areas, in villages. So these should be they should also be included, because lots of students are there in our rural areas. Because city-based students, I think it is very much possible they will go ahead with all these things, but they should also be taken care. Our village child, these students. So how this is a very big task to take care of them. So how to take care of these things?
Yes. I think, some of the states, like Professor Muralidhara mentioned, that see, a task force will be constituted at the district level and the panchayat level to ensure that, these schools, which are, I gave the example of one school, one teacher, no other teacher. The teacher teaches all the subjects. Okay.
Yes,
so
yes.
what this policy is talking about at the school level is, instead of doing that, we have to merge various schools so that more teachers are there and more students. There's a cases of one teacher being there in 50,000 schools. So what they're telling in the policy, that we must merge and try to come out with community learning, which concept is they're taken from US, right. And they are saying that we must see to it, and it will be communicated. This will take time, as I told you in the beginning, that implementation is a big issue here. When will it start? When there will be a transition? When will it happen? We do not know. It's just as a draft policy, and it is just indicating some direction. So a lot of work need to be done. It cannot happen immediately.
Right.
Another point, what the policy talks about is creating clusters of institutions, is particularly schools, where they can share teaching resources. When you want to expand the kind of subjects that you want to teach and you want to bring in the curricular, extracurricular, the various multidisciplinary aspects and vocational aspects, it is not that one school can have all the teachers connected to all these courses and subjects. So they are talking of bringing different schools together so that they can share resources. How exactly it will happen, that we have to
Very
see.
good initiative. Very, such kind of, just I wanted to.
Thank you. Yes, yes, yes.
That's very good.
Yes. Anybody else? Professor Papia Chakravarti, one or two questions would like to entertain? Yes, Dr. Nargis Begum, you are there. Professor Abhijit Dey, you can, if you have any thoughts, if you want to share, please feel free to share your thoughts, your questions.
Hello,
Yes.
am I audible?
Yes, yes, yes. Please go ahead, Dr. Papia. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I was actually inquiring. I was thinking how the fourth year of the BSc course would be like.
Fourth year BSc course.
Yeah, a graduation course. I mean graduation course. Any graduation.
Graduation is for 3 years as usual. And
Yeah.
if you do a 4-year course, it will be 3 years plus 1 year of research. And that is why they have discontinued this MPhil. What is happening is if you do 4 years, which has 3 years, the last year will be doing research. Okay, it will be more research oriented so that you can go over to the master's program for 1 year. If you do a 3-year degree program, you have to do 2 years master's. That's what everybody is doing. Then you can proceed to PhD. Okay, this is what the flow is indicating in the
So if someone does a 4-year course,
yes,
and someone passes the 4th year, then he or she has to apply for NET or GATE.
No, not necessarily. If he or she wants to go for a post graduation after 4 years, he can do it in 1 year now instead of doing it in 2 years. Earlier, what used to happen? Engineering student want to do a post graduation, it will take minimum 2 years. So what is the time he or she is spending? 4 plus 2. Now it is 4 plus 1. Okay.
So,
But only
so
thing is,
this is
Dr.
Yes,
engineering is typically 4 years right now, but it does not involve research.
Yes.
Yes.
So whereas they are saying a 3-year course like a BSc or a BA, then you add on 1 year of research, and then it becomes equivalent to an MPhil course where you can directly do a PhD. So for example, if someone wants after 3 years to go for a job, then he may discontinue after 3 years and have a degree and then go for a job. Someone wants to pursue PhD, they may take up 1 more year of research or enter a master's program, because they have to do a 2 years master's program and then get into research. But basically they have to do 1 year of research in the 4th year if they want to get into PhD.
Yeah, that is what the policy is indicating. Yes, any other question?
Thank you.
Sir, I do have a question.
Yes, please.
I am Dr. Parthapratim Dasgupta, Principal of Barasat College. In fact, I have a number of questions which I put very briefly. Number one is that I personally always had a faith in MPhil. I believe that jumping from PG to PhD is a very difficult task, and MPhil with 2 years regular courses gave you as the orientation. But unfortunately, that orientation will be missing from now, and the result will be that it will be too big a leap from the PG to the PhD for beginners, and because most students are not that well oriented, I believe that PhD will cause a greater amount of problem without the 2 years orientation. This was the first thing which I wanted to say. And the second thing is that we have a college more or less in the urban area where there are a lot of students. In fact, if the graduation course continues for 4 years, what will happen is that the building has to be extended. There should be a number of extra rooms, and there are a lot of students, particularly the general course students, who or many of them come to the college not so much for the degree, but for the sake of spending time. Sometimes they do not sit for the semester examinations, they wait. And because the university generally gives them 2 years extra, meaning 3 plus 2, 5 years. Within 5 years, they have to graduate. And now if 1 year more increases, it will go up to 7 years. Therefore, we will have a lot of students, some of them not for education, but for the sake of doing politics and other things. They will stay and they will dilute the atmosphere of the college. This is what I felt. And these are the two things, you understand, two issues which really troubles me. So if there can be any anecdotes or any suggestions about how these problems can be dealt with. Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Partha Pratim Dasgupta. Yes, definitely. We have already said that, you know, these things will take a lot of time to adjust. You said that, you know, you want to have additional infrastructure because 4-year research, that means 3 years plus 1 plus 1. MPhil is something we all research-oriented people love to have that MPhil. MPhil was very necessary. But this has been thought that, yes, it is a waste of time. That's what the policy is saying. It is saying that you complete your 3 years plus 1 year research, then you go for 1 year masters and then go for PhD. PhD, they are indicating that, yes, you will have to have, you know, 3 years, 4 years, depending on. So PhD, they have not touched much upon. So what you are saying, it's really problematic. There are a lot of issues that has to be really sorted out at the college level or the university level. Yes, Professor Muralidharan, I would like to add something, or Dr. Mishra.
Yeah, as you earlier you have emphasized, earlier the research component was not there, and they are trying to build a research component in the graduation and the post-graduation. So maybe that will give a orientation to research, which can equip students to get into PhD. But the other point, what he is saying, that the infrastructure has to be enhanced and all that, that is a thing which has to be done gradually.
Yes, yes.
I completely agree with Professor Muralidhar said about this regarding the research. They don't have any more MPhil courses because they have given small orientation of research itself in the 4th year itself. So that is somehow compensated. And as I mentioned, he mentioned about the progressive or matching infrastructures. If you will analyze the policy, the government is going to give grant to both private and government institution. They don't make any discrimination that government institution or a government faculty will get some more aid or some research fund, something like that. They made they treat it as one umbrella. So this is why I think the financial aspects will be some extent leveraged by getting government support. And second, what he mentioned, very relevant point of the research of MPhil, that somehow can be compensated by the research in the 4th year itself. So basically mathematics is same whether the students will have 3-year degree, 2-year PG, or 4-year degree, 1-year PG. So basically those are interested to make their career in research, they will go in that way. And those are interested for job in the banking, whatever it may be, the field. So after 3 years, they can also go up preparing for that job. And so they have a lot of opportunities for everybody.
Sir, I have something to say, to add to this.
Yes,
Can I do this? Yes, I'm principal BKC College, Brahmananda Keshav Chandra College, Kolkata. Actually, what I have summarized from this is that I think the BTech, which has the 4-year existing course, the 4th year is only meant for internships. Right. That is the industry orientation, and they are made job. They can go for job, or they can know the actual, they can face the industry. That is the academia industry interface by the students. So I think they are actually trying, the BSc or BA or whichever graduates are becoming, they should be job oriented or else research oriented. And I think they want their 4th year students to spend time with the industry or any other internship programs. That is what they are meaning for research. I think so. That is equivalent to BTech. The BSc is becoming, or BA is becoming 4 years, equivalent to BTech. And BTech 4th year is not classroom oriented course. It's totally internship course.
Field visit work will be there, project work will be there.
Yes, yes, project work. Yes, totally project work with the industry. So they know what they're actually the skills, what they have adopted, and though they have learned, they can implement their skills.
Yeah, the details would be available a bit later. I think there's the content we will come to know, because a lot of work has to be still done on this. You know, what will be the ultimate guidelines, we do not know. What you are indicating is very correct. But, you know, research orientation would be there in the 4th year, you know, just like what you are saying. But instead of internship, maybe research. So what will be the actual thing, we do not know. We'll come to
know. What she mentioned, doctor mentioned, I don't think internship is same as research.
It is
internship is something like an on-the-job training. right? They go and get exposure to the corporate world or the industry, and then get some on-the-job training so that they are well equipped to enter the industry or the corporate. But the research is getting into a different line altogether.
Exactly, exactly.
It is slightly different.
Yeah.
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 Sir, may I talk something regarding the
Yes.
matter?
Yes, Dr. Pankaj. Yes, please.
Yes. I'm Dr. Pankaj Kumar Roy, Principal Jogesh Chandra Chaudhary College. As per the new education policy is concerned, it is free entry, free exit. That is one thing. Secondly, the fourth year, those are in the honors course. They are just studying the research methodology. Like confined with the research for the and different research institute will be formed up as per the guideline. And I feel the MPhil they are calling as the 4 years is there. Regarding the research methodology, they will learn something in the fourth year and then go for the pursuing the PhD. And two types of institution under the traditional universities, under that the multidisciplinary research work, and at the same time the research institute will be formed up for the higher education. One very particular thing in this new education policy, number one, the quality education in all respect. Even in the primary level, the education for all, but there is a small term insert, that is the quality education for all. And now in India, near about 800 universities and 40,000 colleges are there, but out of that 10,000 they are earmarked or reach the benchmark. Then it is the target near about 15,000 colleges or institutions that has to be achieve the benchmark. Therefore, the quality is the main thing, and it is India centric at the same time, the quality centric. Therefore, from the point of view of that, and 1 year, the remaining months of this year and the next year, the discussion will be going on. And right from 2022, the new policy will be implemented is expected. But we have to bear in mind the Article 243, the status of the three-stage central, state, and the concurrent list. All things should be borne in mind. And the allotment will be enhanced from 4 point something to 6%. And gradually that has to be increased. The philanthropic approach that has to be incorporated in this policy. Therefore, the discussion will be going on. If there is some sort of things are there regarding implementation, we think over that and try to eliminate the loopholes of this policy.
Thank you, Dr. Pankaj Kumar. Well,
another point, Dr. Phatak, about the resources you was talking about, and also about the research, enabling students to do research. The policy also is talking about transfer of credits. So that means someone can do 3 years in one college institution and then do the 4th year in another college.
Yes.
So that means he can join a research institution and pursue his research in the 4th year in another college. So that is something which also takes care of maybe the infrastructure and availability of the guides and research facilities.
Yes, transfers of credits are allowed. You can go to some other college. This is which was not happening earlier. Yes, very valid point. Yes. Anybody else would like to say something or any questions you have? If we don't have questions, we can conclude, because the discussions can continue indefinitely. It's a very interesting topic. We can always keep on discussing. The main thing is that we as academic leaders will have to take that responsibility of ensuring that with pros and cons in this national education policy, we have to see what is the best for our students, for our faculty members. See, another point which is really very important is about faculty members. It is mentioned there, which nobody has discussed, is about, B.Eds. B.Eds can be 4 years, B.Ed can be 2 years, B.Ed can be 1 year. and it's talking about teachers training also continuously. And they will be identifying good teachers, average teachers, or bad teachers. And because in the schools, most of the, because B.Ed has become virtually a degree distribution ceremony. It doesn't give any quality to the teachers. So to ensure that, the B.Ed is something which is very, very important for the teachers to go through it. If it is a 4-year course, it will be great, and then we have 2 years and 1 year course, and lesser burden on the teachers. Teachers are highly burdened with so many regulatory issues coming, so many, UGC, AICT, all that coming. So now we believe that Higher Education Commission would be there. There'll be one regulatory authority. So a lot of overburden on the faculty and even the principal, because when they come, we are all busy with those, those forms to be filled up and guidelines. The compliance issues are there. We have to continuously work on that. So the faculty has to be lessened with the administrative load so that they can focus more on, going through this various, teachers training also is there important. It talks about 50 hours of teachers training every year for the teachers. So it's important because we are forgetting the teachers in between. The salary package has also to be looked into, because we are not getting good faculty because they are not being paid good salary. So these are the points which are very, very important. And this is a continuous process. I think we keep on discussing. Implementation is a big deal. We talked about increase in, education contribution for 4.4% to 6%. How will it happen in a phased manner? How will it happen? Because I remember in 2013, this percentage was 3.8%. So in about 7 years, we got into incremental 0.6%. So we'll have to see, because the preference of the government for education sector is, not always there. Successive governments have come and gone. And we had this policy which is coming after virtually 34 years, and there was not discussed. There is no discussion which has taken place. But I'm told there were a lot of discussions which are happening online, and the committee had looked into. But if you see the document, it's really very good. It's really visionary. We can think about that.
See, one of the good things is that they have come out with this policy right in the first year. So they have full term ahead to implement and convert these into law, and then also actually take care of the implementation. That is a positive thing. You are raising a question, what was the hurry? Maybe that they will have full 4 years to actually do implementation. And I think the immediate thing has to be training of teachers. That has to start with that.
Yes, correct.
And there are, some very good institutions like Azim Premji University who are actually focusing on training teachers and primary education. And like that, we need to have many more universities. You must have heard of Azim Premji University, which is funded by Azim Premji of Wipro. And they focus only on education. They don't do any of these degree programs.
So
they train educators.
Yes, sir. So you don't have to go far off. Of IBS Hyderabad, we have got PhD students who are teaching also. This policy talks about teachers training while doing PhD.
Yeah, correct.
So we have been training teachers. They teach in class and then they do their PhD parallel. You don't have to go far off. It's there within our system. And we feel very important. We feel that yes, the faculty should teach also parallelly while doing research. That's really important. Any other question you have? I think we had a very excellent discussion. Really, thank you, Professor Muralidhara, Dr. Mishra, Professor Dilip Shah. Really very nice. We had an interesting discussion. Let us try to work on it. Let us meet more often and try to discuss this and take it forward. It's our responsibility, I said, to come together and work out a solution. Let us look into the pros and cons and try to work out a solution which is best for the students, the faculty members, and everybody in the society also. Thank you so much. Yes, Abhishek, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for
so
all the
much.
principals.
The principals, really thank you very much for coming to this, giving your valuable time. We are really obliged. We are honored to have you here. We feel that we should continue discussing in future also.
A nice
Thank you.
initiative by your institution, Pathak sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to all the participants. It was really a very, very enlightening. It was lively. It was intellectually stimulating. The discussion was all these terms and many more adjectives. It was very informative for somebody like me to be hearing all eminent personalities from across the eastern region. It was good. I really thank the panelists. They took their time to think, get their thoughts together, and put it up for all of us to see and all of us to understand. Very important points pointed out by all of our panelists and all of our members in the discussion. A very nice analysis, brilliant analysis done by Dr. Mishra. It was very nice. We also had Dilip Shah. He also gave us his thoughts. Dr. Pathak and Muralidhara sir, thank you for your support. We will hopefully in future again have these kind of sessions. Maybe next time we'll do a combination of the live and the offline session. So we'll have an offline session and we'll have a screen for all the others for all across the region so that they don't have to travel too much. So we'll see, we can explore this. We can take the good parts out of the pandemic, which is now maybe we'll have a hybrid structure going forward. One of the things that this document maybe also has to look on, that it will be hybrid once we go ahead. So just my great thanks to all of you again. We will be ending this session now. If anybody has anything else to say or anything else to contribute, please do go ahead, or we'll be stopping this session now. We'll get in touch with you individually like we do across the years. Thank you again to all the guests and all the panelists. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.